E.O. Wilson, so you can learn about this school of thought, which I'm characterizing for you as biophilic conservationism, which is, E.O. Wilson wants to insist, is firmly anthropocentric. He even says it's selfish. But he says that biophilia deepens the selfish motives of environmentalism, of resource protectionism, right? Biophilia deepens, but they're still selfish. I think that's what he's saying. You know, and why? Because selfish reasons are the only ones, he wants to say, that actually move people to act. So we have to articulate, right? If we're good, if we're wise people and see what's happening, then we have to articulate as biologists, as good biologists, and as good moral philosophers, environmental philosophers. We have to articulate those selfish reasons, right? Because those are the ones that move people, the only ones that move people, and those are the only ones, maybe he's going to agree with Baxter, those are the only ones that are even real to think about, right? The selfish reasons of people, of specific people that are alive today. But he wants to say that this, and we all have to come along and try to define biophilia. I like to talk about it as the biophilia hypothesis, which is really all it is. And he's credited with coining the term, and probably I think it's fair to say, to credit him with coming up with the whole idea, right, with the whole concept, with the hypothesis, the biophilia hypothesis, which, as far as I can tell, basically states that humans are, perhaps you could insert the word genetically, perhaps not. Humans are predisposed, biologically predisposed, probably would be accurate, to be deeply connected to and have loving, meaningful, rich relationships with non-human animals and with natural landscapes. So, you know, he's saying that we need, part of what he's saying is really familiar. We need to get away from this crazy anthropomorphized world with all these grids and all this concrete, and we need to get out where the sunlight is dappled and bouncing off the water, right, and the deer is bounding across the meadow, and we need to be exposed to things like that because it's in our genes, right? And if we're not right, that's familiar. That's kind of the sort of thing that John Muir was saying about why we should preserve the Sierra Nevada. But I think he's saying a lot more than that. So, all right, so let's get into it. He's saying a lot more than just that it's good for us or that we're genetically predisposed to be happy in pretty natural places with the dappled light and the trout leaping in the pond and all that. So where are we? So we did the orcas. There are our friends. Just wonderful friends. All right. They're still here. So, I think we did enough of this. That's kind of all right, so we have to get more into Darwin. Many of the thinkers that we read accept Darwin's theory of the evolution of morality. Has everyone had a chance to sign this attendance sheet? No. It hasn't been over here? All right. Let me move it back, all the way back here, and then move back over again. Nobody on this side signed it? No? Okay. I think what I'll do from now on, I'll start it way up there and have it go all the way back and then come forward at the end. And then we won't get confused about whether it should be crossed over the aisle. I had a professor in law school that would just freak out if he saw the attendance sheet go in the wrong direction. You know, he wanted it to go and then not pass the aisle until way back there, and then, anyway, but I'm not a real stickler like that. Charles Darwin's theory of the evolution of morality looms very large throughout this course. Okay, it just does. It has to in an environmental philosophy class because the influence of Darwin is just huge, and he just tapped into an extension of Enlightenment thinking that somebody was going to end up tapping into, and you know, reaching all kinds of rational conclusions about human behavior and where we come from, our past, our ancestry, our evolution, etc. And Charles Darwin was the guy that came along and did that. And he also had this theory of the evolution of morality, which was his response to those who criticized him and suggested that morality is always predicated on God, right? He said, well, his critics would say, well, you can't be right because humans have these tender instincts. They might, you know, these tender feelings that we have toward one another. We're not all about competing. That's not what we're about. And according to you, that's what nature's about. But that was probably, anyway, they mischaracterized Darwin too. Mischaracterized him quite badly. And he was just saying, look, we're social animals, okay? And we can account for the evolution of morality by observing that human communities which are bonded together by strong moral norms are going to have much stronger cooperation and kinship among unrelated people, helping people, right? And those communities are going to survive over the long term. And so naturally, if you look at the long span of the evolution of humankind, then you're going to observe, if you were able to observe all that, you would observe those communities which consist of a bunch of selfish people, they would die away, right? If a community is all, the members of a community are in competition with each other, they're going to die away, right? Whereas if the members of a community have enough of a sense of morality to cooperate on some areas, then they're going to be more likely to survive. And so evolution selects those human communities which have strong moral norms. Okay? So the evolution of moral norms is a survival tool for human communities. Okay? It encourages individuals in human communities to make sacrifices and to recognize limitations on their freedom of action, right? But those limitations on individual freedom of action are beneficial for the long-term survival of the community. Okay? And that's how we explain the evolution of morality, without having to refer to any kind of God planted a conscience in us and all this stuff. We don't need that anymore. We understand now where morality comes from. All right? It's a fairly convincing and very influential theory of the evolution of morality, and many of our thinkers accept it. Pretty much all of them. I mean, some of our thinkers want to say Darwin was wrong, that there are teleological elements in evolution, but certainly guys like Leopold and Norton and Wilson accept Darwin wholeheartedly. So let's go over Darwin's theory of evolution a little bit more carefully. According to Darwin, morality evolved as a survival mechanism. Moral judgments consist of feelings. That's very important, okay? From a Darwinian point of view, moral judgments are feelings. And lo and behold, soon we'll learn that there are philosophical precursors of Darwin on this particular point, that moral judgments consist of feelings. And those precursors, philosophers who said the same thing, who came before, are David Hume and Adam Smith, the great Scottish Enlightenment thinkers. Okay? For them, moral judgments consist of feelings of approval and disapproval. So too for Darwin. Okay? And this is important because, and this makes sense, right? Because moral judgments have to be rooted in biological responses, right? And our emotions, our feelings, are biological phenomena. So that would make sense, that our moral judgments consist of feelings because they're rooted in biology. Okay? Moral judgments, therefore, one implication of this, you might question whether this is accurate or not. I'm not sure. I'll throw it out there. Moral judgments are always, from a Darwinian point of view, going to be anthropogenic, anthropocentric, and consequentialist. They're going to be anthropogenic precisely because, hey man, they evolved as tools of long-term human survival. That's it. If conserving old-growth forests was definitely not in our long-term human survival, because it means pulling the plug on all these human communities or something like that, then we wouldn't do it, right? We wouldn't want to do it. So our moral judgments are always going to be anthropocentric. If we believe that moral judgments are a tool of human survival, if there's something more than that, then maybe there's room for a non-anthropocentric foundation for a moral judgment, right? Anyway, this is all controversial, so maybe I should just move along. So moral norms are evolutionarily selected social rules that help facilitate the long-term survival and flourishing of human communities. All right? These are restrictions on individual liberty that benefit the community. Right? Bad for individuals, but good for the whole. Humans are social animals like wolves, dolphins, and most other mammals. Acquisition of food and other necessities is dependent on cooperative action. Moral norms developed as moral norms. Okay, this is how they developed. They developed as means of codifying and reinforcing sentiments of kinship and camaraderie among unrelated members of social groups. Sentiments of kinship increased, right, codified and reinforced in moral norms, increased the survival chances of social groups by enhancing cooperation among individual members. Right, this is all very Darwinian, right? Very kind of scientific explanation of how a sense of morality emerged among humans. Groups regulate, and I'm not saying it's accurate. It may be totally way off base. It might be infected with all kinds of colonialist assumptions. Who knows? Be very Eurocentric, perhaps. Groups regulated by norms that encourage cooperation and cohesiveness were more likely to survive and flourish than groups that lacked such norms. Groups dominated by individuals with weak moral sentiments tended to die out. That's on the epitaph of the United States of America. Right? As societies evolved over the course of many millennia, moral sentiments and the norms that reinforced them were gradually extended to an ever-widening circle of individuals, including, so, right, this is how over many millennia, eventually, Leopold talks like this too, right? Remember his story about the slave girls who were just property, who were hanged? And how he talks about this ever-widening circle of moral concern that now he thinks should get so wide as to include elements of every element in the biotic community. But that's similar, right? I mean, it's very similar, kind of, which makes sense, because of course Leopold is just steeped in Darwin. Any biologist or ecologist in the early 20th century is steeped in Darwin and accepts Darwin wholeheartedly. So it's no wonder that Darwin's is going to sound a lot. Leopold is just borrowing from Darwin's theory when he talks about the evolution of ethics, right? At the very beginning of his essay that I asked you to read. So we could perhaps fruitfully compare from this perspective, from a Darwinian, Humean, and we'll soon learn Callicott, because Baird Callicott is the interpreter of Leopold who most champions this idea that Leopold is this neo-Humean, Darwinist, etc. But so let's compare, and then in this comparison, I think would be accurate. I mean, there is a morality of a wolf pack that also evolved as an adaptation to their physical needs, so that they could survive in the long term. Wolves will be very good to members of their own packs, but if they go, if they encounter a wolf from another pack in their territory, they might well kill it, right? That happened in Yellowstone. That still happens, not regular. I don't know how often it happens, but Yellowstone, there's been a lot of contention because there were quite a few different packs, and they were all kind of crossing, not all of them, but some of them were crossing each other's territory, and so there were some brutal incidents where wolves killed other wolves from other packs in Yellowstone. It happens regularly. So we might think, well, man, how could that be moral? That they don't have a morality. But if you view morality as just your biological and emotional responses to the situations that you confront, that force you to take shortcuts where you're not thinking about it, right? What's the right thing to do? Sometimes if you're a wolf, that involves killing another wolf. I guess if you were a human too, way back in the day, right? And some foreign person came across your territory, you might, I don't know. There's stories of people killing others like that. Anyway, I don't know. So although the content of wolf pack morality differs significantly from the content of human morality, the form of wolf pack morality is identical to the form of human morality. Both are biologically and emotively based. Both were evolutionarily selected to promote long-term survival and flourishing. Wolf pack moral judgments are wolf-genic, wolf-centric, and of course also, and necessarily, consequentialist. They're the ones that lead to the best outcomes, right? Evolutionarily speaking, those moral judgments are the ones that evolutionarily led to the best outcomes. Like wolves, under Darwin's theory, humans judge things in nature to be morally valuable only if they benefit the long-term interests of the human community. Or, of course, the short-term interests of an individual. For both wolves and humans and all other species, nothing in nature is intrinsically valuable, right? That's fair, isn't it? Is there anything intrinsically valuable to a wolf other than its own life, probably? And perhaps that's what we have to conclude about humans, too. The only thing intrinsic, and that's the common viewpoint. So all of a sudden, we're back to just old mainstream, humans are number one. Are we? Could be in big trouble. Anyway, and we may be in big trouble if we're concerned about that. If we want to be non-anthropocentrist, then E.O. Wilson does not offer us any comfort. All right? What else did I want to accomplish today? I forget it. I don't think anything, really. Just we've already been over what's going to happen with the midterms. So let's just take a couple minutes and then we'll take our break. But does anyone have any questions about the midterms that you've had a chance to sit there and think about what you're going to do over the weekend? for this class? No? We can go back over them if we have some more time at the end.
How many pages did you say again for?
Well, I'm thinking a minimum of a couple hundred words per short essay. Did some people's stomachs just drop, or did some people just think, wow, man, that's all? What do you guys think?
The latter.
The latter? Wow, man, that's all? Well, maybe I should say 300. But if there are 5 essays, you guys will figure it out.
Hard.
Some people do write very pithy responses that I'm amazed that they really comprehend the material and they're able to write shorter. But I would encourage people to aim for about a 200-word average on them. Some of them might be shorter and some of them might be longer. All right. All right, yeah, so we have that one question where I just want you to be a good Leopoldian. All right, and you may or may not wade out into the stuff about wolves have a biotic right. I mean, how can you not, right? Uncle Aldo just lays out these huge, tempting, tantalizing quotes for you, so. But in general, I'm happy if you just stay on the reservation, right? We're just, we're restricted to anthropocentric environmental ethics for the time being, all right? We'll get to go off reservation next week, all right? Isn't that exciting? All right, so let's take our break, all right? And just come back. We'll take a 7-minute break today and come back right at the top of the hour.
Yeah, you can find this whole.
Oh, sure, man. Yeah, no worries. So you're all caught up now?
Oh, yeah.
Steve Young. Is it the quarterback or the dude who wrote 7 Bridges Road?
I usually get referred to as a quarterback.
The guy, you know that famous song that Eagles popularized?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I forget. Anyway, but it's, yeah, 7 Bridges Road, and that's the famous song.
I'm not gonna like
The original writer, singer-songwriter.
Oh, that's
Steve Young.
Well, I'm going to have to find out. That's actually the first time I've ever heard they refer to that.
He's really good.
Okay.
He's still around. He had that song was really big.
I give you my school email.
And he has some other.
It was great to my.
He's a very talented songwriter. And these other people have covered this song.
I have it all hooked up so that
I saw him
just
perform.
forwards everywhere. So
Cool, okay.
see it.
Sure.
Yeah.
All these little, I saw him in a church.
Okay.
The audience was maybe 50 people.
Can you read that?
RODRNA?
Kind of
Yeah.
just-
Okay.
Yes, it's
My
kind of
eyes
a thing.
are
I didn't realize that song was anything at all, but that's class.
Such knowledge
There
that-
were some songs which are curriculum from the letters.
I reset my phone and I didn't catch what the time was on. So it was like 25 minutes behind. So I was sitting up there thinking it was only 11:30, and then I heard him talking and I was like, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So what are the readings are we supposed to go over? Per se.
Well, I'm gonna just read the ones that we've already, and then he said he was gonna email the other. Yeah.
So what?
That looks like this one, maybe this one.
Okay. So like the first 4? Okay.
I have to look at the notes, slides on the
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Spite of your continued attacks, come below, we will teach you to swim around. to relax, and I will take you home. Never again will be alone. No, you mustn't check my feelings, and I just don't want to get wet with you. Home with me, we'll lay in the garden sun, digging in the blueberry tree. You know I can't get out of water, I'm a dolphin, not an otter, can't go out on land. I have no legs, I cannot stand. I can't get wet, salt in my furnace, yes, so stupid. On the ground, but around there I'll shoot around, but from my heart I want to tell you that I love you. So give me the hardest wish. My best friend sounds just like fish.
There has to be a case of development. You should actually draw a wolf on the slide and see if anyone notices next time.
Do what?
You should draw a wolf on the slide and see if anyone actually notices it. On the picture of
No,
like
the other ones
Superior.
are from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Let's see it.
Amazing how many ships right now, and you can get a map, pretty much, you can get a shipwreck map of Lake Superior, and I swear there's a ship every square inch of that lake floor has a Lungan ship on it.
Really?
It's amazing. No, probably not. I mean, you know, they got to fit them all on the map, though, and that's what it looks like. All kinds of really famous shipwrecks, horrifying things. And a couple where people were, they survived,
Yeah.
but they ended up stranded on the island. Stranded on Isle Royal in December. You know, some real tragic stories of people, you know, who like this one person wrote a note, left it in somewhere that they found later. She wanted her parents to know what happened to her. And that's what, you know, she shipwrecked and she ended up on that island. And then that just freezing and starving to death. It's just, yeah, it's amazing. That lake is really quite something. The snow there gets they get so much snow that the markers when you're driving down, you know, our guide pointed out this marker and he said that's how high the snow gets. It's just way up there. It's like 50 feet up, you know. Lake effect snow, they call that. It's really cool there. I don't know if I can handle the winters, but I wouldn't mind living in that part of the country just because it's pretty rugged. There's a lot of charm. All right, so here we go. So where do we start? Start here. Hold on. Okay, now I'll just do review. I don't know why those slides got in there. All right. So, E.O. Wilson is also known as one of the founders of a school of thought that's come to be called sociobiology. And philosophers generally are quite skeptical. I myself am. Many philosophers are a little bit skeptical of what Professor Wilson has tried to do in the way of linking all human behaviors toward biological and genetic conditions. And anyway, but so take all that with a grain of salt. We're not interested in sociobiology anyway, but that's kind of what one of his claims to fame is his discussion of sociobiology. It's a systematic study of the biological basis of all social behavior. Essentially, he wants to reduce, or he believes that we can reduce the causes of all behavior to our genes. And morality, most importantly, morality emerges genetically. Okay, I don't want to get too deep, obviously. I start floundering around sometimes when I start talking about things, and I want to try to explain them, but then so that's one of those areas that I don't know enough about. But for those of you who are interested, go read his book on sociobiology. Okay, this is an overall, you could say this is maybe a meta-ethical perspective. This next quote that I have here for you. Our passions and toil are enabling mechanisms to continue our existence unbroken, unsullied, and progressively secure. It is for ourselves and not for any abstract morality that we think into the distant future. For if the whole process of our life is directed toward preserving our species and personal genes, kind of a big metaphysical assumption there, if you ask me. Well, the whole process of our life? Maybe, maybe not. For if the whole process of our life is directed toward preserving our species and personal genes, preparing for future generations is an expression of the highest morality of which humans are capable. Okay, good. So that's how he deepens the selfish ethic. It's unfair, but he uses the term himself. He says this is kind of a selfish ethic, because that's the one that people respond to, he says. Wilson accepts Darwin's account of the origin and nature of moral reasoning. Anthropogenic, anthropocentric, consequentialist, measured through sentiments of approval and disapproval. Right? Those are all the hallmarks of a Darwinian account of the origin and nature of moral reasoning. The nature of it, right? It's anthropogenic, anthropocentric, and consequentialist. It's measured through sentiments of approval and disapproval. And its origin is biological and evolutionary. Wilson accepts that all moral norms, including, for example, moral norms about the impropriety of destroying biodiversity, that's his big issue, remember? He's really kind of a single-issue guy, because that's the most that he could possibly think to try to tackle, right? That's huge, a concern for biodiversity. He's just this huge champion for biodiversity. So he accepts that all moral norms evolve and come to be accepted as instruments of human survival and flourishing. The only plausible and only effective environmental ethic will be a surface ethic, based strictly on human self-interest. We need to apply the first law of human altruism ably put by Garrett Hardin. I just kind of cringe, I'm sorry. We're in a philosophy class, so I'm entitled to announce that I cringe when I see these guys, these clumsy scientists, just trotting along out there, thinking they're doing moral philosophy, okay, come on. We're doing philosophy here, and they're making contributions, right? We're including them on this curriculum, but anyway, Garrett Hardin's another, he's a scientist, he's not a moral philosopher, so just take all this with a grain of salt. In a way, there's a bit of quackery going on here, all right? But let's read him as charitably as possible and try to reconstruct his argument as philosophers. We need to apply the first law of human altruism ably put by Garrett Hardin. Never ask people to do anything they consider contrary to their own best interest. The only way to make a conservation ethic work is to ground it in ultimately selfish reasoning. But the premises must be of a new and more potent kind. Okay? So he wants to deepen selfish reasoning, and that's the role of biophilia. Which if true, if the biophilia hypothesis is true, that's great, man. That's a great deepening. Because it's saying that, look, we really screwed up. The matrix of our survival and the very basis of our intellects and of our capacity to love, everything that's dear to us, comes out of our direct relationship with unspoiled nature. And so if we're spoiling all this nature, look at all that we're losing, right? We're losing all those things that I just mentioned that are all about us, right? We're losing our humanity. So, so that is how we deepen selfish reasoning, okay? And that is how we make the connection between the empirical observation of the loss of biodiversity, right? We've got to find a bridge. We've got to find a way to get over. He wants to say that's morally wrong. He's not going to stomp his foot, though, is he? He doesn't need to. He says it's morally wrong for consequentialist reasons, right? Only the non-consequentialists go around stomping their foot. And he's not a non-consequentialist. He's just a garden variety conservationist, right? Who's deepened his garden variety. He's more than a garden variety because he's got some exotic stuff going on. as you will see, actually his appeal to biophilia takes us really right to the edge of humanity, right to the edge of anthro-land, shall we say. Because, and doesn't it remind you of reverence for life? Could you substitute biophilia in Schweitzer's essay? Could you just take out reverence for life and put in biophilia and have it make sense? Right? It means something a little bit different, I guess, but isn't there a connection there? Isn't that what the geese were feeling? They were feeling biophilic sentiments toward their fellow goose, whose feathers got clipped, right? They went back and they waited for their relative, right? Because of their biophilic sentiments. And Schweitzer wants to say, that's the heart of our moral sentiments for everything. Not just for one another, not just for other animals, but also for one another too. And even the great moral principle that Kant points to is ultimately based in a sentiment. And so ultimately, even the rule of biocentrism is rooted in a biological, emotive, right, reality. And that's what, and then another term for that could be biophilia, right? This biological, emotional reality, sentimental biological reality of kinship connection with the more than human world, right? And that makes it necessary to preserve the moral human world. But it's still for our interest, right? But we're right at the edge of, because it's also everyone else's interest, right? To have healthy water, healthy air, healthy land, healthy wildlife. So, anyway, so actually, and that was one question that I kind of made a note of in the syllabus to ask myself and for you guys to think about in class too, is what, if anything, do the concepts of biophilia and reverence for life add to the resource management ethic of Leopold's Group B conservationists? All right? So in other words, look, on the midterm exam, I've already identified for you guys that I'm happy if you guys just interpret biophilic conservationism as one aspect, kind of one subspecies of Group B conservationism, right? But you might ask yourself, in what way is it different, right? What does biophilia add? What does the biophilia hypothesis add? How does it actually make conservationism deeper? And it probably does. I mean, certainly Wilson thinks he's onto something here. Other people have, this concept has become pretty popular too. This is probably might end up being his most enduring contribution to environmental philosophy, is this concept of biophilia that developed by other people. He doesn't do a very good job developing it. But he coined the term. He is kind of his little baby, his little idea that he put out there that has caught on. An essential component of this formula that conservation ethic must be grounded in ultimately selfish reasoning is that people will conserve land and species fiercely if they foresee